The number of Iraqis killed in the past 3 years could be as high as 650,000. It's way beyond previous estimates, but American researchers insist it's the most accurate yet, whatever the president says.
I don't consider it a credible report. Neither does General Casey, and neither do Iraqi officials. I do know that a lot of innocent people have died, and that troubles me.
The Americans also say that they're now preparing to stay in Iraq until 2010. Good evening. The number of civilians killed since the invasion of Iraq could be as high as 655,000, according to the leading medical journal, The Lancet. The estimate, much higher than previous figures, was produced by American and Iraqi researchers. The findings are highly controversial. If true, the figure of just under 655,000 would represent 500 deaths every day since the conflict began. President Bush said the survey wasn't credible, and he said that despite the appalling violence, US forces would not abandon Iraq. The Americans now say that they're preparing to stay there, maybe until 2010. First tonight, Andrew North reports from Baghdad.
The daily carnage in Baghdad is not in dispute. Car bombs, beheadings, torturing people to death using electric drills and boiling water have become part of the day-to-day reality of life in the city. What is in doubt are the results of this violence. This new study puts the figures far in advance of any previous estimate. It suggests there have been 654,965 excess deaths, fatalities beyond the pre-invasion death rate. More than 600,000 were due to violence. The vast majority of those killed are male and between the ages of 15 and 44. Put another way, the survey says an additional 1 in 40 people have died, above what would have occurred had there not been a conflict. The figures are controversial, though. They're an estimate based on a sample of Iraqi families. President Bush was quick to dispute the research.
The stakes are high. As a matter of fact, they couldn't be higher. If we were to abandon that country before the Iraqis can defend their young democracy, the terrorists would take control of Iraq and establish a new safe haven from which to launch new attacks on America.
That the violence is costing so many lives is also rejected by the Iraqi government, but one official takes a different line.
In fact, the figure is saddening, given the large number of Iraqis killed as a result of the war entered into by Iraq's former regime. It led to the country's invasion and the creation of armed organizations and the arrival in Iraq of hundreds of terrorists of various nationalities.
It's impossible to know for sure how many Iraqis have been killed since the invasion in 2003. And with the worsening security situation, it gets harder than ever for researchers and journalists to find out for sure. But on one thing there's no doubt. The numbers of Iraqis being killed each month is rising. And that's why more and more people are leaving Iraq altogether. Like Faiza al-Araji, who's fled with her family to neighbouring Jordan.
You're not protected. Anyone will come to attack your house, attack your son, attack your wife, for nothing, just you are suspected.
Even with more US boots on the ground in Baghdad, the bloodshed is undiminished. And the Americans say they may have to keep troop numbers at current levels for another 4 years.
No, I don't consider it a credible report. Neither does General Casey, and neither do Iraqi officials. I do know that a lot of innocent people have died, and that troubles me, and it grieves me.
That's little comfort to Iraqis. For them, the exact figures on the violence don't really matter. Everyone knows things are bad. They just want someone to find a solution. Andrew North, BBC News, Baghdad.
Well, the latest survey of Iraqi deaths has, of course, provoked immediate questions about the way these figures were produced. David Schuckman has been examining how the figure of 655,000 deaths was reached, and he's here now. David.
Hugh, we'll never know how many Iraqis have died since the invasion because it's too dangerous to find out. Until now, estimates have ranged from nearly 50,000, this from a voluntary group, to about 30,000, the most recent figure from President Bush. Now, this latest study involved research in 47 neighbourhoods across Iraq. Nearly 2,000 households in Baghdad and elsewhere were randomly chosen, and nearly 13,000 people were interviewed. The results show that the death rate, which was 5.5 per thousand before the war, is now more than twice that. The researchers applied that rate nationally, and that's how they get the total figure of more than 650,000. The publishers say this is valid.
This team of American and Iraqi public health scientists went out, knocked on the doors of 2,000 homes, identified 12,000 individuals, chased down death certificates to make sure all the deaths did indeed take place and were caused by the causes that the families identified. Nobody else has gathered this kind of reliable data. It's the best information we have.
But how reliable is this? The figure is so much higher than any others. Well, the interviews are a new source of data, mostly backed with documentary proof. And the technique has been widely used elsewhere, in Africa, for example. But the study does have weaknesses. First, it is an estimate, not an exact count, and it's based on sampling. And this is the margin of error, pretty huge, though even the lowest figure points to a massive death toll. But critics say such high figures aren't credible.
If that's true, then every reporter, everyone who's covered this story, everyone in Iraq who's Iraqi, as an official or as a politician, including all of the people who opposed the coalition, somehow missed all of this. They didn't see this scale of violence.
The researchers are accused of playing politics. They say they're closer to the truth about the real Iraqi death toll. They've certainly raised very serious questions about it. Hugh.
David, thank you very much. And our World Affairs editor, John Simpson, is here. John, what do you make of these figures?
Well, it's difficult to be certain. If you're sitting in Baghdad, you know roughly what the death figures are in Baghdad, and they're very high, but you know nothing about what's happening in Baquba or Tikrit or any of 70 or 80 other towns where we know there's likely to be trouble. So the figures really are possible. It's just that nobody can tell. And the problem, of course, is the terrible state of what's happening in Iraq. Fact is, as we've seen, that it's entirely politicized. If, like Mr. Cordesman, you support President Bush to the hilt, you say, no, it's rubbish. If not, I suspect that people who are against the war will take that figure of roughly 500,000 deaths and assume that that's the figure.
How important do you think it is to put these figures in the context of the ongoing political process in the States?
I think very important indeed. Here we are just coming up to the midterm elections, and that appalling figure which makes it possible, at any rate, that the invasion of Iraq has caused twice as many deaths as happened during Saddam Hussein's 25 years in power. That's the kind of thing that affects people. I've noticed already that among American officials and senior American military people, there's the same process that happened with the British about a year ago, and it's starting now in America. People losing faith in the whole process and just carrying on because that's the professional thing to do. I think that process is something that's starting now to affect America very strongly.
John, thank you very much.